I do think with natalism, it's one of those things where right now, if you do leave it totally to people's choices, the way culture has kind of molded people, we will die as a society because less and less people are having kids. So I would like to, at least for the people who have where economic anguish is the reason they're not having kids, I'd like to give them that opportunity.
What do you think about like unintended consequences of social engineering? Because I tend to agree with you that like a higher birth rate would be better, but I worry about, like, we've kind of seen this policy in action already, right? The encouragement of single motherhood through government policy, through incentivizing financially having children, you end up with this epidemic of single parents.
Ravage the black community.
Yeah, the black community, like in the 1970s, had like something like an 80% dual family households, and now it's down to like 15%. And a large portion of that change is due to government policy that has created this incentive for people to have kids, even if they're not in a place in their life where they can really afford to have kids. So how would you respond to something like that, like these ideas of unintended consequences of social engineering?
I think if there's unintended consequences, you make the political case to change it, you know, and ultimately, no matter what we do, every decision we make, every decision the government makes is going to have those. You know, I think you look back to the Iraq War, it had insane support. It was like 80% support or something like that to go in at the time. And, you know, we should have probably a lot quicker made the decision once realizing there's more information and all that, like, oh, that was probably a bad decision and reverse course. So maybe that's a bad example. But I think that, you know, you can't live in fear of unintended consequences, but you do have to be mindful of them and try to enact policy, which we talk about on the tech issue all the time. You know, if you're going to reform Section 230, you got to do it in a way that yields the fewest unintended consequences. But, you know, I can't predict that. No one can. Right.
Yeah, I think the libertarians.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, well, the difference is you're right that every action has unintended consequences, but when you're dealing with action at the society-wide level, you risk much greater or more harmful unintended consequences than when the individuals are acting. Because if Mike does something and it has an unintended consequence, it pretty much only affects Mike. But if the government does something, it affects everybody.
Right.
That's all beauty of federalism is one state can really screw up, and the other 49 can be like, not doing that. Where if the whole nation does it, we're kind of all screwed.
True.
But I forgot what my thought.
Just as a counter to that,
sure.
Inaction is an action as well, right? So theoretically, if we all accepted the premise that the birth rate declining to 1.6 was unsustainable and was going to be disastrous for our society, where we're having a Handmaid's Tale-like future, dystopian future, and the choices are act to have policies that promote having children or not. I guarantee you're right that there will be unintended consequences to this. But what are the unintended consequences?
Right. So at that point, you have to kind of do a projection, a cost-benefit analysis projection forward, and hope that your analysis is right.
I think one of the big problems, too, with conservatism, traditionally, maybe 10, 15 years ago, is kind of like with healthcare. Like, we criticize the Democrats always with an idea, but all we do is criticize and we don't have a solution. And I think people are hungry for a solution. So I think the real danger, especially with people who are more libertarian bent, where we're like, my thing is we don't know enough. We don't have enough capacity to know all the ins and outs for a top-down solution to work without where the costs are going to outweigh the benefit is where my qualm is, I think, typically. But if all we say is we shouldn't do anything, that's not a winning political message.